I'd like to welcome everyone to this execution webinar themed Unlocking the Sustainability Paradox for African Airlines. It is co-organized by AFRA, that's African Airlines Association, and Visa, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the African Civil Aviation Commission. With that, I would just like to welcome the SG to give his opening remarks. SG, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. First of all, I want to thank our partners for this workshop, Anvisa, ICAO, and AFCAC. The theme being AFRA, the Decarbonization Pathway Workshop. Speakers, representative of AFRA member airlines, partners, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to this important workshop on practical decarbonization pathways for African airlines. While the global journey to net zero emission by 2050 is one of the most significant strategic transformations our industry has undertaken, Africa's pathway must reflect our realities, which are rapid growth of air transport, limited access to sustainable aviation fuel, financing constraints, infrastructure gaps, and the need to maintain affordable connectivity across the continent. That is why today's workshop is very important. It is about turning ambition into action. Throughout this workshop, you will explore practical strategies, proven tools, and real-world case studies that can be adapted to the African operating environment. Our objective is for every participant to live with actionable ideas that can be integrated into our member airlines' sustainability strategy and implementation roadmap. This workshop also supports the implementation of AFRA's fact sheet and call for action on decarbonization pathways to net zero emissions by 2050. Decarbonization will succeed only through strong partnerships among airlines, stakeholders, government, financial institutions, fuel suppliers, manufacturers, and development partners. I thank all the participants again in this workshop, and I wish you a productive and successful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, SG. Next, I would like to invite Sharon from Envisa to give some opening remarks. So Sharon, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Delighted to be here from Envisa. We're a small consultancy who work globally, especially in Africa. Very important, just picking up on SG comments as well about working together with third parties and especially with airports for the decarbonization. We'll talk about that more later on, but that's very important that everybody can work together in this global issue.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So I'd also like to welcome Chinga to give some remarks on behalf of ICAO.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and a very good afternoon, good day to everyone. My name is Chinga Mashetese. I am a regional officer responsible for environment, and I work at the ICAO Nairobi office. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure to present ICAO's work on COSIA. And for us, most of the time, we have ready access to the state. So we really treasure this opportunity that we have today to be able to speak to the airlines, who are the users and the people that provide us with the information that we'll be publishing in our ICAO documents. So we're looking forward to all the discussions, and we are available here to clarify any issues that may be needing clarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chinga. Franklin, maybe before we start, if you have any opening remarks on behalf of AFCAC, before you give your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. Good day, everyone. My name is Franklin Omondi. I work at AFCAC, the African Civil Aviation Commission. I work closely with the speakers before me, with Dan, who is also supporting a lot of technical work that we do, and also with Chinga from ICAO, who we collaborate with in our outreach efforts to states. And I'm happy to be here and also to speak to airlines. If time permits, I'll also talk about what we are doing to support sustainability, decarbonization in Africa, and how our works also supports what ICAO is doing at the global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Franklin, for that. So just by way of how the program will be structured is that we'll begin with AFCAC. AFCAC will give the perspectives on the global decarbonization frameworks, following which we will have we will share some insights from the AFRA Envisa survey, and that will be done by myself and Sharon from Envisa. Then we will proceed to then move to the aspects of the main subject of the execution workshop, which is tools for measuring and monitoring flight emissions and noise. So we'll be covering this in two aspects. That's on carbon emissions. So we'll have some presentations from ICAO, as well as AFRA, some case studies from AFRA, as well as a case study from Envisa. And then we will do the second part, that is on noise, where we'll just have one case study from Envisa, which I believe would be a live demo by Michelle and Kumasi. And then we'll also have some peer-to-peer learning, and then we'll have a closing. So without further ado, then I will just I'd like to just welcome Franklin back to start his presentation. So thank you.
Thank you once again, Dan. I really want to speak so fast and try and share as much information as possible. So just by way of introducing AFCAC, for those who are new to AFCAC, we are an African institution, an agency of the African Union, responsible for civil aviation matters in the African continent. And we work with the states and also the organizations that support aviation in Africa, such as ICAO. We work with AFRA and many other institutions, the regional economic communities, the regional safety oversight organizations, amongst others. Today, I just want to highlight some of the work that AFCAC is doing, and then I'll conclude my presentation with some of the views and AFCAC's position on global decarbonization framework. So if we could go to the next slide. The slides will be made available. Dan, you'll make them available. So I'll really just rush through them, but you can make it available for the members who then can look at them in more detail. And if there are questions, they can also always reach out to me. So in AFCAC and within the African continent, we've mapped out 4 strategic areas on aviation, environmental protection, or sustainability. And these 4 broad areas, they touch on sustainable aviation fuels and the low carbon aviation fuels, state action plans, which is abbreviated in the slide as SAP, state action plans for CO2 emissions reduction, COSIA, which is the carbon offsetting reduction scheme for international aviation. And also we focus on building capacity and expertise within the African continent. And each one, we've mapped out some sort of targets that we would want to achieve in the triennium. Our triennium runs for the 3 years since 2025. So 2025, 2026, and 2027. If we could go to the next slide. So my next slide, it's a really busy slide, but it's really trying to put the information about sustainable aviation fuels and the low carbon aviation fuels in one place. But the key message I want really to emphasize here is the implementation model that was recently adopted during the first ever African Air Transport Convention and Expo in 2026 in Lome in June this year. And when we look at how the implementation of sustainable aviation fuels in Africa is going, we feel that regional approaches with certain countries which we have identified as anchor countries that could be the location for refining capabilities, but with a lot of support from the regions. So if you look at the center of the slide, we have the African map with the anchor countries identified. In the north, we have Egypt, we have Kenya, we have Ethiopia, we have South Africa and Nigeria. And some of the countries that are likely to support these anchor countries. This in no way does not segregate or say that the other African countries do not have a role to play. What we are essentially doing and saying is that we have a pilot approach in the regions that contributes to the continental perspectives. And one of the things that we've developed at the continental level is the strategy, as well as having an aspirational target that is aligned with ICAO's global framework for sustainable aviation fuels of targeting 5% CO2 reduction by the year 2030 through the development and deployment of sustainable aviation fuels. So we feel that if regions really optimize the strengths that exist in the different regions, we can contribute towards moving African countries closer to the production of sustainable aviation fuels. My next slide. The next slide is just about COSIA, and COSIA is the ICAO's and globally agreed market-based measure for addressing CO2 emissions from international aviation. And there are some numbers about COSIA. It has adopted a phased implementation approach with the year 2024 to 2026 being the first phase, with potentially offsetting. And from 2027, it may be mandatory for most states, and some of them in Africa. Currently, most African states are participating in COSIA on a voluntary basis. But as we move forward, some of them may enter the mandatory phase. You see the number today, we have about 26 African countries participating in COSIA. We have some numbers on verification body, and this is highlighted because it's one of the areas we are targeting to address, because we want to enable African airlines to be able to achieve the compliance or COSIA obligation requirements in a cost-effective way. The SG talked about reducing costs of air transport in Africa, and this is one of the ways or methods or examples we are trying to do to reduce the cost of air travel in Africa. Some of the things we've done together with ICAO is on having models for Annex 16, Volume 4, as well as other volumes of the Annex 16. This is just to support states with tools that they can easily adopt to be able to undertake their COSIA oversight functions. If we go to my next slide. So my next slide will be touching on State Action Plan, which is also another ICAO's initiative, but also aligned to the long-term aspirational goal of net zero by 2050, that is the LTAG. And it is a state action plan, an initiative that has been around with us, I believe, from 2016. And as AFCAC, we asked ourselves, how can we better support African states to put together plans to address CO2 emissions in a way that can also be measured and also demonstrate progress. And we've attached this to one of safety initiatives, so to speak, but in a way that allows us to measure progress. Today, we have some numbers in the African continent. We have about 43 submissions to ICAO, remaining 11 states that are not yet submitted, and some of them need to be reviewed because ICAO requires state action plans to be reviewed at least once every 3 years. So this is just some of the numbers on state action plan, and we try to link it with Abuja safety targets to be able to promote implementation and also to report on progress. Before I go to my, I think my next slide should be, if we go to the next slide. Yes, before I conclude, I was requested to speak up a little bit about AFCAC's view on global decarbonization. And I just want to highlight a few things. So I've just highlighted in the slides what AFCAC is doing, but we also maintain views. We work closely with ICAO because AFCAC constitutionally is, we are created to promote and support African states in the implementation of ICAO standards and recommended practices. So we are fully committed as AFCAC and as Africa towards aviation decarbonization. And we are committed to ensure that the transition is equitable, practical, and supports the projected growth of African aviation. African airlines must not be left in this journey towards net zero transition. Now, one of the examples of our commitment to climate action is the support that the African countries lent in the agreement of the ICAO long-term aspirational goal of net zero by 2050, as well as the implementation of COSIA and other ICAO initiatives such as the State Action Plan. Therefore, for us in Africa, the challenge is not about choosing growth or sustainability. We want to achieve both simultaneously. Remember, everything that we do, we want to protect the projected growth of African aviation, at least sustainably. The second view that we hold is that ICAO must remain the only global platform where standards on aviation decarbonization and sustainability is discussed. We see that there are emerging concerns where there is the risk of multiple compliance systems, double regulation, and efforts that may be distortive to the market and may also introduce additional burdens to African states and mainly to the African operators. Our message is that we support one global framework led by ICAO. So these standards should actually come mainly and predominantly at ICAO level where all states contribute. We also hold the view that decarbonization should be equitable and fair. Today, African aviation and mainly African airlines, they face high operating costs, access to finance, infrastructure as has been alluded to by the SecGen. There is also a smaller market compared to other regions in the world. Therefore, in efforts to promote aviation decarbonization, we advocate that it should not be disproportionate and it should not introduce disproportionate burden to African states. We also fight and advocate for recognition of special circumstances of African states. And also, for example, we had, when we adopted the global framework on sustainable aviation fuels, an appropriate means of implementation support, and ICAO is really working hard on this. The next one is sustainable aviation fuels is Africa's biggest opportunity. We have in Africa, and we have several studies have continued to show this, that there is enormous resources in Africa in terms of resources from municipal waste to agricultural residue, renewable energy, green hydrogen potential, vast land suitable for sustainable, for growing crops for sustainable aviation fuels. With all this resource, our contribution to SAF is still very, very small. AFCAC, we are saying that we should not be a consumer of imported SAF. And this is why we have adopted the regional approach towards sustainable aviation fuels development in Africa. Some of the things that we've done together with some of the speakers in the room is the continental strategy that positions Africa to leverage on its strength, optimize its existing infrastructure and resources to be able to produce sustainable aviation fuels. Next is on airlines. Airlines cannot carry the decarbonization efforts alone. Many people tend to think that airlines are responsible, but we believe that successful decarbonization requires more than airlines. We have governments, we have airports, we have suppliers, investors, regional economic communities, we have AFCAC, we have ICAO, and the private sector. Therefore, we believe that airlines are only a part of the decarbonization ecosystem. The important message is that all these stakeholders, from governments, airports, regional economic communities, OEMs, and all the stakeholders must work together to have aviation decarbonization a truly global effort. The other thing I want to talk about, and I saw in the video, about operational measures that also contribute to decarbonization. And this, we believe, airlines do play an important role. Operational measures include those measures that reduce fuel efficiency as a result of actions taken to improve the efficiency of airlines. For example, we have measures such as reducing weight, proper flight planning, having systems that capture data and report fuel consumption, air traffic management improvements, initiatives such as single engine taxi, engine core wash. These measures also contribute to the reduction of CO2 emissions, and they also contribute to lower operating costs. And this majority of them are really mainly airline actions. The message is that aggregation of these measures by the African airlines, and I know AFRA is really working hard to do this aggregation. One of them, they have really done a good job, is the free routing airspace initiative. Some of these initiatives, such as the single engine taxi, predictive maintenance, could also form part of this measurement to really document Africa's contribution to the CO2 reduction efforts. The next is something that I've already touched about, on how data becomes a strategic asset. Airlines remain custodian of some of this data that can showcase decarbonization. Data that can project fuel burn, emissions reduction, the usage of sustainable aviation fuels as and when it becomes available. The quality of data will play a big role in influencing the policy discussions, even at ICAO level. Therefore, our call as AFCA is that we urge, and since I'm talking to mainly airlines, is on integration of these sustainability initiatives into your operations, participating actively through AFRA or through AFCAC in the initiatives that support data collection and data-driven kind of policy making, engaging in the initiatives to support the development of sustainable aviation fuels production and as well as uptake, investing in operational efficiencies that reduce emissions reduction, and building partnerships and advocating together with AFCAC and EFRA and ICAO at international levels and forums to be able to influence policy decisions at the global level that supports the growth of African aviation like we want. As AFCAC, we continue to support, we continue to coordinate, and we continue to work with everyone to be able to protect and maintain the sustainable growth of African aviation. Thank you very much, and I'll stay on the call should there be any questions. Dan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Franklin, for those great insights. I think for AFRA, we are quite aligned on the call for action. We also encourage airlines to integrate the sustainability pathways into their operations. And as the SG mentioned, we actually have the AFRA fact sheet and call to action, which is quite aligned with some of the pathways that you've highlighted. I can see that there is a comment on the chat. It's more for your information from Youssef Al-Gareb, and he says that sustainability aviation fuel faces several significant hurdles that limits its adoption. The primary drawbacks include prohibitive costs. So currently, this stand at 2 to 4 times more than the conventional jet fuel, and strict blending limits, typically 10 to 50% SAF with standard fuel, and severe supply constraints regarding raw feedstocks like used cooking oil. So thank you so much, Youssef. Yes, these are that we also at AFRA and industry associate with, and as part of the advocacy efforts that we're doing is to address. So there are 2 questions. Just in the interest of time, if they're able to just make the interventions quite short, I can see there's Cornelius and Cynthia. So I don't know if they are able to. Are they unable to speak? If not, if they can put their questions on the chat box. DC, are we able to enable their mics, or should they put their questions on the chat box? Okay, Cornelius, you're able to speak. Kindly unmute. Okay, Cornelius. Okay, he seems not to be able to unmute. For Cynthia, are you able to make your intervention? Okay, if not, maybe we will just move to the next part of the presentation, which is the AFRA and Visa survey, and here we'll be presenting this with Envisa, Sharon from Envisa. Thank you so much. Could we kindly have them on full slides? Thank you. So the Afra and Visa survey was actually done sometime last year. It ran from the 9th of December to the 31st of January. And the main objective of this particular survey was to evaluate and better assess the needs, the sustainability needs of Afra member airlines, with a view to assisting them towards attainment of the global decarbonization commitments. So by way of demographic, we had about 2 lines. We had significant representation from this was a significant representation by way of background. So we can actually now go into slide, please.
We have some issues, Daniel, with your sound.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but sometimes it cuts out, just to let you know.
Okay, I think there's an issue with network on our end. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Still not great. So I think Daniel has some connection issues. Maybe we can take it from here and kind of cover the survey.
Okay, so Danielle, as you're off sound anyway for the moment, what I propose to do is I will cover the slides for the moment, and when you come back, please join us. What was very important about this survey, this joint survey, is that we wanted to hear from AFRA members exactly what the situation was, what your challenges were. That's really important. And we got some very interesting answers back. I can see you, Danielle. Are you back again? No, he's not. Okay. One interesting thing that came up was the carbon footprint and data collection. We've heard this come up also from Franklin as well, how important it is when you have your legal frameworks and your operating frameworks, you need to have data. You need to have data to measure where you are now, where you're going to go, and improvements that have been made, and also any leakages or any challenges that need to be fixed. Regarding carbon management, it remains at an early and uneven stage with limited decarbonation planning across the airlines. This we will discuss later on when we talk about building your capacity. It's very important that we have good data, stable data, and reliable data. It will be the same for the airports as well. They need data, and they need data from you as well. So we are all in it together, working together with the need for constant, stable, reliable data, with the systems that can collect the data, and also with colleagues who understand how they can collect the data, look for any errors or leakages from the data. Very often the data is used in the environmental management systems for the airports and the airlines. So this is maybe a framework that can be looked at to be improved, and training given to build capacity. That's both on carbon management and data collection. That's really important. The Scope 3 emissions, which are essential also for airports when they are looking at their carbon reduction schemes, the ACA. The airlines are one of the biggest producers of the Scope 3 emissions. It's also in airlines' interests as well, also for CORSIA, for reporting that the data collections are automated as well, especially the Scope 3 emissions. The offsetting participation in the voluntary carbon offset programs remains limited. One of the biggest ones, of course, is the ACA scheme, which is for airports, but airlines, again, are very heavily involved. Again, it all comes back down to data. Also, limited access to accredited verifiers. We see this as one of the KPIs as well for that Franklin mentioned as well. Again, capacity constraints and knowledge gaps are very important. This is why it is important as well to make a mapping across the continent to see what are the knowledge gaps, what do we need. What do we need also is verifiers who can verify the data as well. That's important. And how can we build together the knowledge and the capacity constraints? Okay, fuel efficiency. Most airlines have implemented the flight optimization programs to reduce fuel burn. Again, when we talk about operational efficiency and techniques to do this, airlines cannot do this on their own. They have to work together with ANSPs, and they have to work together also with the airports. That's a really important point. And they also need to be able to capture the data that these fuel efficiency programs and techniques will involve. I'll ask my colleagues to comment on that as well. Dennis, do you have something to say on this, on the fuel efficiency?
Not necessarily, but I think it's fuel efficiency has been a part of the basket of measures, of course, since essentially this and the beginnings of the conversation around sustainability innovation. So I think it's very front and center to many of the participants today.
Yes, and also it's very important to have a plan, to have a long-term plan on this as well. Yeah, and to map where are you now, what's happening now, and what are the gaps, what are the leakages, and what do you want to achieve in the future? As Franklin has said, there are KPIs already out there. I'm sure we'll hear this also from ICAO. So you can map where you are now, where do you need to go in the future, and where do you need support on? And how can you work with your operational partners, for example, the airports, the NSPs, your fuel suppliers, and your ground handling as well. Noise and air quality. It's important, yes, to have the noise management strategies and the air quality mitigation measures as the operational hubs. Again, this has to be done hand in hand with your ANSPs. It goes hand in hand with operational techniques as well, flying techniques. Also, if there's any noise constraints around your airport, what are the noise regulations in place, the local noise regulations and practices also. Also having systems to measure your noise and to measure your air quality, that's extremely important, and have them harmonized across your airports. We will look at this again with my colleagues from our noise and air quality, Michele and Kumar. I just would like to ask them both if they have anything that they would like to say on this topic at this stage in the conversation. Okay. Danielle, do you have anything you'd like to come in now and add to this? No. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Sharon. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Hello. Okay, thank you for holding. Yeah, technology has failed me today. Yes, so thank you so much for covering that. So yes, as Sharon has mentioned, I think she's covered quite well. This was also just to share some of the findings that we got. So I think the part that you covered is quite okay. So I'll just continue from here in terms of SAF, and then you could always feel free to complement. So in terms of SAF, the findings of the survey, the 22 airlines that participated, is that SAF remains at an early strategic stage with limited integration into airline decarbonization pathways. So in terms of the cost and supply, that was in terms of the finding, that is that high cost and limited production capacity in Africa remain a barrier. And airlines also show limited willingness to absorb the SAF premiums. In terms of financing and arrangements, the survey reported that there was engagement with financing mechanisms, including development banks and green funds. However, this remained nascent, so it was also at early stage. In terms of long-term offtake agreements, these were found to be largely absent or still under consideration. Also under SAF passenger schemes, in terms of voluntary passenger contribution schemes, this remained the airlines that participated in the survey positioned themselves primarily as anchor buyers and off-takers first, and then secondly as policy influencers, and lastly as regulatory advocates and catalysts for. Hello, is there an echo on your end? I'm seeing, or is everything okay? Tekeba? Okay. So yes, so in terms of the role, they see themselves primarily as anchor buyers. Next slide, please. Unless Sharon or Dennis, you have anything on the SAF component of the survey.
I'll give that to Dennis. That's his area.
Okay,
Thank
Dennis.
you, Sharon, and thank you, Dan. Yeah, maybe I can go a bit further on the SAF parts. The next few minutes are indeed about sustainable aviation fuel, but the fuel results only make sense and against a couple of seemingly unrelated numbers that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So roughly 18% of the world population lives on the African continent, and it's only about 2% of the global air traffic. Now, my career has been partly in industry and partly alongside third sector organizations, mostly environmental NGOs. So the growth argument is one I have had on both sides of the barricade, as it were. A few years ago, the industry came up with this concept, which is license to grow. And I think, again, many of us have heard it. We have been arguing ever since that SAF is the industry's license to grow. It's certainly part of African aviation social license to enhance connectivity by growing. And I think even a lot of environmental NGOs will accept that if aviation has room to grow anywhere, that is in Africa. The growth, however, needs to be literally fueled by energy that does not create additional dependencies for the continent and for its aviation industry. So with that framing, I think we can use the survey findings that Dan covered a moment ago, mostly as a signal, not necessarily a full census, of course, because we have about, I believe it's 35 responses on the SAF section. So yeah, it's not exhaustive by any means, but I think it does reveal a couple of interesting data points. 15% of the respondents, I think, have highlighted they have a SAF target, and 5% say that they have signed an offtake agreement. Now, let me just stop and acknowledge that discussing alternative fuel is difficult when securing conventional fuel at the right quantity, at the right quality, so up to spec, is still a challenge for many carriers. I think that is the case in some parts of Africa, and I think, well, some parts of the world, in fact. So SAF is clearly not the absolute first priority for the industry, which is understandable, and the results somewhat reflect that. On the cost side, I think airlines were asked how much of green premium they have or they have tolerance towards, and Dan, I think you covered this. If we go into a bit more detail, the question was framed: what is the premium that the airline can absorb before fare structures start to get affected? Which is interesting framing, by the way. And the answer, I think, ranged between 1% risk premium, so premium over conventional fuel, and 20%, which is a rather high number, I would say. But I think the average is about 9%. Now, let me caveat this by saying that this is probably based on conventional fuel price in late 2025, early 2026. So the current outlook for the industry is not exactly one of fuel abundance, and certainly prices are going to be reflecting that. Now, I want to point something out that is slightly controversial, and that is that in the longer term, if conventional fuel prices rise, the green premium for SAF could actually narrow on its own. Now, there is some data that shows that SAF prices actually track conventional fuel prices quite well. So any increase in conventional fuel price will translate to SAF, and sometimes disproportionate so. But this may not be the case in the future. There's different reasons for that. I don't think we have time to go into those at the moment, but There's no single SAF price as well. I think HEFA, Fischer-Tropsch, and other production pathways can differ vastly in terms of cost and feedstock. One finding that I think is revealing is that airlines have asked whether locally produced SAF is likely to reduce dependence on imported fuel. And 37% said yes. 58% said potentially. So that's 95% that see benefit in locally produced SAF in Africa. They were also asked whether a SAF roadmap will be useful. 75% said yes, and the rest said they are considering it. So interestingly, no one said no, thank you, no SAF map, no SAF roadmap is needed here. We're fine. And perhaps one quick technical segue that I'd like to make, just because jet fuel and diesel are in the wider news cycle these days. Now, from a refining point of view, these are considered middle distillates, meaning that they come from a fraction of the refining column that is, literally in the middle, and that is not where a refiner's bigger portion of margins or profit is. So those products are often refined close to the crude extraction point, meaning in this case, a lot of the production is actually happening in the Middle East. And most of you will know that Africa exports a great amount of crudes and imports almost all of it as refined products. So going back briefly to the social aspect of things and of growth, because the changes that this introduces, I think it's important. In contrast, in Europe, for example, the sustainability debate is mostly about reducing existing flying. Here's the question whether there's actually a need to reduce flying is ongoing in Europe and other parts of the world. In Africa, that's clearly not the case. That returns us to the figure that's 95% of the respondents see potential in SAF production in Africa, and that it would make a difference. I think if we have to have one takeaway number from the SAF section of the survey, that will be personally that I would highlight this one. Now that figure points to some practical work, I guess, but the environmental picture is of course wider than the fuel and the carbon dioxide issues. So my colleague Kumars will set out where Envisa's technical work stands across this wider environmental landscape. So over to you, Kumars.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Kumars.
Hello. I think if you're talking the subject of SAF, as Dennis was mentioning before, Envisa has some experience with mass balance. I don't know if anyone here is aware of the effect that mass balance can have, but effectively what mass balance does is it reduces the cost of fuel handling a lot, which helps I know if in the direct term it might not seem to affect the airlines, but it actually does, because if the airport is using mass balance in the effect to handle their fuel and distribute the fuel to the airlines, then effectively the cost of the fuel handling comes down, and in the end, and as a consequence, the cost of the fuel that is presented to the airlines will come down. And I'd like to actually mention here that we have some experience with handling sustainable aviation fuel. We have done some work with Airbus, actually. We helped them get their certification for SAF in 3 of their sites. And they are actually using now a tool that we developed in-house, Envisa, for doing specifically mass balance for handling their SAF. And that shows actually that SAF is becoming more and more important in the operations throughout the airport, throughout the aviation industry. And Envisa has been actually an active part of it, and we would like to actually be expanding our expertise to different airports. I saw that in the survey that some of the airports throughout Africa actually are looking to incorporate SAF, and one of the challenges that they're seeing is the increased cost with respect to that, to actual usual jet fuel. And mass balance is actually a very good solution to that, because as I said, it can it can decrease the cost of fuel handling, cost of SAF in the end, and it makes it much more viable as an option for an alternative fuel. I think that's all on my case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we'll move to the next slide, please. So in terms of the training needs, the priority training areas were carbon reduction management, aviation sustainability strategy, and tools to measure and monitor flight emissions and noise. And actually, this two-part webinar series, this being the first one, addresses both carbon reduction and tools to measure and monitor. The second webinar, which is going to be scheduled sometime in September, 15th of September, will go into a deeper dive into the aviation sustainability strategy. So unless Sharon, Dennis, or Kumas, you have anything to add, I think this would we were able to now get the key takeaway. Unless you have anything on this particular slide.
Dan, if I could just quickly say on this one, we've done the survey, but if there is anybody here on the webinar who can have any other contribution to this, please put it in the comments. And also please put any challenges that you might have in the comments, and this will help us work together to see how we can best support you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sharon. So we can just move to the last slide, which is the key takeaway. So the survey findings would inform now structured capacity building. I think this being the first, and we hope to have many others with Envisa and our partners. As Sharon has said, if there's any capacity building needs you may have, kindly put them on the chat box or reach out to ourselves, and we will see how best to support with that. It will also inform sustained advocacy, some of the issues around the premiums and incentivization would need a bit of advocacy on that, so that we're able to tailor this also to the needs of our member airlines towards supporting progress towards net zero emissions, and of course also addressing the broader sustainability challenges facing the industry. So with that, I believe we're now done with the AFRA survey, and we can now move to the ICAO part of the program, where Chinga will be taking us through carbon offsetting. So could we kindly have the slide shared? Thank you so much. Could we kindly, okay, they were shared on PDF, so maybe if you're able to increase the size. Okay. Okay, I think that should be fine. So Chinga, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And like I mentioned earlier on, it's a pleasure for us to be here. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So from our side, we do have our basket of measures that we have. It's not on the slide. ICAO has a basket of measures that we use with 4 elements in it. And these elements are operational improvements, we have technology, we have market-based measures, and the use of alternative fuels. So the focus of this presentation is to talk on the COSIA, which is the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. And when you look at the structure of the COSIA, we have mostly three things. We have the MRV, the monitoring, reporting, and verification of CO2 emissions, where airlines on a yearly basis collect the information pertaining to how much fuel they've used, and they report this to the CAAs, and this is done through engaging third parties, verifiers, and this information ends up being submitted to ICAO, and we use this information for a number of calculations that we have. And besides the MRV that is done by the airlines using the different fuel use monitoring methods, we also have the use of COSIA eligible fuels and the use of COSIA eligible emissions units. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to address the calculation of offsetting requirements, as well as talk a bit on the eligible emissions units, where you find it in the new developments that we have made on our website regarding tracking how much eligible emissions units are available, where do you find them, how do you purchase them. Next slide. To calculate aeroplane operators' offsetting requirements, we have this equation that you see here, and this is available in Annex 16, Volume 4, under Section 3.2. It states that each state will calculate how much each operator that is attributed to them should offset. And the calculation is done using this equation, where we are saying for us to know how much offsetting requirements each operator has, we have to look at the annual emissions of that operator, subject to offsetting requirements. Please just take note of that, subject to offsetting requirements. When you do your MRV, you have routes that subject to offsetting requirements and those that are not subject to offsetting requirements. And this depends on who has volunteered to participate. And you multiply this by what we call a growth factor. So I would just like to give you a heads up. Please prepare. We are going to do a short practice on how to calculate this. We have another slide where we'll ask you to do a few calculations. So please just be ready for that. Next slide, please. And when you look at that equation that we have, we said we'll calculate it looking at how much emissions we have emitted for offsetting routes, multiplied by what we call a sectoral growth factor. We call it the SGF in short. And this is a number that is calculated by ICAO, and it is published in one of our ICAO documents that is available on our website. And when you see the value that is there, you use it as it is. So if the number, for example, is in 8 significant figures, when the state calculates the emissions units of offsetting requirements for the airline, they will use it as it is. And we have already published a state letter 17-129 informing states on this and why we are using the 8 significant figures. Next slide, please. And when we talk of this calculating offsetting requirements, we use this sector's growth factor as well as an individual growth factor. But for today, we will put aside the individual growth factor because if you look at the bottom picture there, we have from 2021 to 2023, all the way, 2021 all the way to 2032, we are looking at 100% sectoral growth. So there's no aspect of adding the individual aspect that will come in 2033. So we will do calculations many times. We hope to have more sessions where we'll get the same platform to share this, and we will be doing this as we progress. But for the purposes of today, we only look at doing the calculations at 100% sectoral growth. Next slide, please. And to calculate this SGF, I have this example here that I have. And this sectoral growth factor will be published in that ICAO document that you see here. So for this document, it was published in October 2024, but it was telling us of the SGF of 2023. Because what happens is in 2023, the airlines did their monitoring of their emissions from 1 January to 31st of December 2023. Then early 2024, they started preparing their emissions reports, which they submitted to their authorities. And these authorities were now able to submit information to us by the 31st of July of 2024. So between July and the date that this document was published in October, we collected all the information from all airlines that had submitted information to their states, and we calculated the SGF. And as we see, these are the real figures that you see here. To calculate the SGF, we need to know the emissions that were emitted by the sector for that given year. In this year, the year Y is representing 2023. So in gray there you see total 2023 CO2 emissions for all state pairs in the whole world subject to offsetting requirements. We had about 330 million tons of CO2 emissions. And then when we look at the baseline now, if we go back to 2019 data and we compare the same routes, how much emissions were there? There were 351, which meant that if we subtracted that 330 minus 351, that number would give us already a negative. So the SGF for 2023 was minus 0.06. So there was no need to have any offsetting requirements for any airline, because whatever you have emitted as an airline, we're going to multiply it by that minus 0.06, which would give you a negative. So there was no need to do any offsetting. Next slide, please. But things changed now when we moved to the following year. Next slide, please. So when we look at 2024, in October 2025, following the same process of the MRV and calculating, in October 2025, we published the SGF for 2024. And like I mentioned earlier, things have changed now. So for the first time, we had a positive sectoral growth factor. And you find that in 2024, it was 0.15 with all those numbers. And like we said earlier, you have to keep those significant figures. You're not supposed to round them off. So we published this as it is, and states will use this number that you see here to calculate the offsetting requirements for each airline. Next slide, please. So these slides that we had earlier on were just helping you to see how we come up with this sectoral growth factor. So all the information that you give us from your monitoring contributes to that. And if we come back to this now, we did mention that, as you saw, the growth factor changes every year. And it is calculated by us. And this is the information that we'll also put on the COSIA Central Registry. So the screenshots that you see here are coming from the inputs, the dummy trial training version of our COSIA Central Registry, where states actually go in to put information. So for example, they will put in information on the airplane operators and CO2 emissions that are subject to state pairs, also subject to the airplane operators. So if you see here on airplane operators A, B, C, and EDC, you can actually see how much CO2 emissions subject to offsetting requirements they have submitted. So that information now is aggregated for all the states, and we use that information to calculate our SGF. Next slide, please. And this is an example. So this is an imaginary year. Apologies for the typo. Our imaginary year is 2024. So in year 2024, an operator emitted 36,000 from offsetting routes, which means there were routes between two participating states that have volunteered to participate in COSIA. And ICAO calculated the SGF for that year, for 2024, to be 15.948315%. And then the state focal point is requested now to calculate how much emissions that operator is supposed to offset. So using the same equation that we had, we say the operator's emissions times the growth factor, and then we get the offsetting requirements for that year. So 36,000 times the 15.9, etc. %, this will give us 5,741.393490, which is what the airline now will need to offset, which means this airline will need to go on the carbon market and purchase emissions units that are equivalent to this number if they did not use a cost-eligible fuel. Next slide, please. So now I will pause a bit and then share this next slide exercise that we have. So please allow me to request you to just take out a piece of paper and put your answer in the chat. We have this scenario that we have here. It's an imaginary airline that we have. And this airline is called Operator Sahara. And for the period 2021 to 2023, Operator Sahara has been operating in Africa. And for year 2021, they emitted 356,080 emissions for the routes that are subject to offsetting. And ICAO that year calculated and found that the SGF was 17%. 2022, they had 391,000 and the SGF was 11.4. 2023, they had 370,291 and the SGF was 6.9. So using the same equation that you see below, operators' annual CO2 offsetting requirements is equal to the CO2 emission subject offsetting requirements times the growth factor. Please calculate for A, B, and C. Apologies again for that typo. For A, B, and C, and just put your answers in the chat. I'll give this maybe, we start with number 1A for 2021. So you just put your answer 2021 and you put the number that you think is the correct answer. And then if you are looking at B, 1B, just put 1B and you put the correct answer. And then we'll give this exercise maybe 5 minutes. Is it okay, 5 minutes, Daniel? If there are any questions, challenges on this, please feel free to ask as well. And then we'll move on to the remainder of the presentation. Okay, I'm yet to see any responses. Okay, I got one. Thank you so much. From Enos, 2021. Thank you, Serge. We have about a few more minutes. Thank you, 2022. Thank you, Mr. Onyango. Any more? Yes, thank you, Rosemary. Okay, thank you as well. I see Sage has reached 1C and some people has also reached 2023. So 1:15 we will stop and then we will share the answers. We'll just pause a bit for any questions for anyone that would like to understand how to do these calculations. And while you're doing the calculations, allow me also to mention that it is very important that you understand how to do these calculations because it is the responsibility of the authority in your state. So usually it's the CAAs. Of course, your focal point is the one that does the calculation and submits that number to you. So if you have any questions and you want to understand how they did it, you can also do your own calculation and see and be able to have those discussions with the focal point pertaining to how to calculate these numbers. Thank you. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, these are the answers that we have. So I would like to also highlight that the percentage is 17%. You are supposed to change it to a decimal first. I see some numbers are quite long in the chart. It's because you probably just said multiplied it by 17. So you need to put this as 0.17, for example, for 2021, 0.17 times 356,080. So that gives you 60,533.6. Same applies to 11.4. When you multiply that by 391,000, you get 44,574. And 6.9% multiplied by 370,291 to give us 25,550.079. I believe this was fairly straightforward. I'll also pause. Thank you so much for all those that participated. I see the comments in the chat here. Thank you very much for that. Any questions? I'll just pause here a bit for any questions before I move on to the other part of the presentation, which is outside the calculations. Are we comfortable with the calculations? Which means if you are from the operators, if you know how much emissions you emitted for the offsetting routes, you are also able to do the calculation even before you receive the official communication from the state authority informing you of how much you need to offset. I don't see any questions on this or any raised hand. So I will just proceed with the presentation. But if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And thank you so much for the participation once again. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Now we move on. You have calculated the emissions and you know for 2021 in that given year, these are the emissions that I'm supposed to offset. And we have not used a cost eligible fuel. So you cannot claim for any emissions reductions. Or even if you have used a cost eligible fuel and you have claimed for the emissions reductions, you still have some emissions units that are still there that need to be offset. What do you do next? So we want to talk about the cost eligible emissions units. So these are carbon offsets approved by the ICAO Council based on the recommendations that are given by a technical advisory body, which we call the TEB. And there are two documents that we have in ICAO for these two. So the first document is looking at the criteria. What criteria is required for a program to be included under COSIA, to say this program that has got projects that produce emissions units is considered under COSIA and approved. What are the criteria? So that's document number one. So this is the document that the TEB uses when they do their assessment. They assess against that eligibility criteria that is in this document. And once they have done that and they've recommended the programs to the ICAO Council, the council, when they review based on the recommendation, they do the approval. And when they do the approval, the programs are listed in the second document, the one that is right in front of you, written cost eligible emissions units. So this is the document where now airlines will go in to see where can I do the purchasing. Next slide. And from our side, I will be doing at the end a live demonstration of our website, cost eligible emissions units dashboard that we recently updated, and just showing you how to find some of the information. And as of 20th of July, the approved programs that we have for the cost eligible fuels for the first phase, 2024 to 2026, they have labeled 41.6 million units as cost eligible. And these units have been verified, issued, and labeled, which means they meet all the COSIA criteria. And we went ahead and launched this dashboard that we will show you later. And what we encourage you is to contact each of those programs when you want to purchase any emissions units. And on this picture that we took here, the screenshot, we actually zoomed into Africa to show you the status of the program registry when it comes to what is coming out of the continent. So the orange ones is a program, the dark blue and light blue are all different programs. And on the left, you can see the host country, the country that is hosting those emissions units. So we'll go into the details of that later on. Next slide, please. And the steps that you have is that we mentioned this earlier. We have the programs that generate their emissions units, and then these emissions units, these programs apply to ICAO, and once they're approved, they are put in the document, and then these eligible emissions units are available on the carbon market. So an airplane operator now will have to go and purchase those emissions units equivalent to the amount of offsetting requirements that they have. And then once they do that, they need to do what we call cancellation of the emissions units, where they need to submit a supplementary document on the cancellation of the emissions units. And next slide, please. This slide is very important as well because it helps iron out a number of questions that we usually have. So when you look at these eligible emissions units, they are available in this document that we have here. We have what we call eligibility. Is it eligible? This is determined by the ICAO Council, and it's defined in the ICAO document that we showed you with the eligibility criteria. Is it available? We can have a list of a number of emissions units, but availability depends on the issuance of what we call a host country attestation or a letter of authorization for the projects or units. We'll also explain that later on. And the demand of the emissions units will be determined by the total final offsetting CO2 offsetting requirements after accounting for the benefits of the cost eligible fuel. So if you have used a cost eligible fuel, for example, a SAF, you need to remove whatever you save the environment from, and what remains is what is required. So the demand now for cost eligible emissions will only be determined when we have done that total final CO2 offsetting requirements after we account for all the benefits that the airlines will have from the use of cost eligible fuels. Total offsetting requirements for the first phase for 2026 are estimated is approximately 200 metric tons. The screenshots that you see here on the right is just showing you the examples of some of the programs, for example, the American Carbon Registry and I believe it's called Standard. The one at the bottom is not very clear. Next slide, please. And when it comes to the availability, we did mention that having the list there and saying from a state A, there are 3,000 emissions units doesn't mean that those emissions units are available under COSIA. They'll only be available when that country, which is hosting those emissions units, which we call a host country, has issued the letter of authorization. And this we do it to avoid double claiming of emissions units. And we work hand in hand with the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And they have this form that you see here. We've also provided the link for you to have a look at the form that the states will need to complete. So when the state now says these emissions units in my country, out of the 3,000, how many are we going to give to COSIA? Are we giving all the 3,000, or are we going to select a few and use the others for our nationally determined contributions? So this form really helps to avoid that double claiming that can be done in the absence of this letter of authorization. So emissions units only become available, airlines can only purchase them when that country is issued a letter of authorization. Next slide, please. So the programs that are aiming to supply COSIA emissions units for COSIA, they should obtain the letters of authorizations from the host country, and then they should make this publicly available before labeling any units as eligible for COSIA and for allowing airlines to use them. But who has the decision to issue this? It is the host country. So from some of the work that we have done in ICAO is we have really tried to work very closely with our focal points from the CAAs, Civil Aviation Authorities, or the departments of civil aviation to sensitize them on the importance of talking to the other government departments in their country, usually the Ministry of Environment, and raising awareness on the importance of this issuance of letters of authorizations. Next slide, please. Now, if you allow me, I would like to just pause here and share my screen so that I can go through this COSIA CEEU's dashboard. Okay. Okay, I believe you can see my screen. Can you confirm, Daniel? Okay. Okay, I see it coming up. So this is the page that we have. So how do you get to this page? You come to our global priorities. You have the strategic goal on aviation is environmentally sustainable, and you come to COSIA. So under COSIA on the homepage, we've changed it to come up with this dashboard. So just take note that there are 3 tabs here. We have a tab here for COSIA implementation overview, a tab for certified eligible fuels, and then a tab for the emissions units. So we will talk on this tab for emissions units, and you can also just zoom in and see what is happening country by country. So this is what we have in Africa. So for example, we have this state of Rwanda. The program registry is the gold standard, and the quantity of emissions units is 461,034. We can also move out and look at other countries, for example, Nigeria. So when you click on each country, apologies, I think my network is very, very slow. Okay, now you see all the countries that we have in the whole world. So you just click on the country, for example, I was here in Nigeria. You click on Nigeria, it gives you exactly how many cost-eligible emissions units there are. And so if we also look at another country, for example, Madagascar, we have 2.8 million, and they also tell you. So for you to be able to know how to identify and find information, we do have the information in our ICAO document on the list of programs that have been approved. But in addition to that, we've also provided you with the links to the program registry. And this is the same link that you'll find in the ICAO document on the approved program. So when you click on this, you will now find the information on the program registry and what is available and how you can contact them to be able to purchase these emissions units. So please feel free to just visit this page. I'll put the link in the chat at the end of the presentation, but please feel free. We update this link so many times. This is the latest update that we've done as of 20 July this week. We have started updating it as far as April this year, 2026. We've been doing this. And if you want to find more information on cost-eligible emissions units, you can click here. And this page, when you click on it, it actually takes you to the documents with the information that you require. For example, the document on the criteria that is used for approving those programs, as well as the document on the emissions units. So you can download it here and you find that information that we were sharing as well here on the specific program registry. With that, allow me to stop here and hand the floor back to Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chinga, for that very insightful presentation. And also the audience, most on calculations. And I'm happy to note that at least the participants on workshop were able to get the questions right. So I'll just quickly move on to my presentation, which will just be more of updates. So I'll not have a physical presentation. Okay, and there's also I thank you from SAA, that is Rosemary and Bengu. So thank you so much for those remarks for Chinga. So I'll just quickly just give an update. As Chinga has said, the main way of setting under COSIA is SAF and COSIA, and the CEUs, that is the carbon the carbon emission units. So just with regards to SAF, I'd like to bring an update that as of last year, we introduced SAF as a component of the AfraFuel tender program, and we continually encourage member airlines to submit their volumes. Normally, the call for submission of the volumes goes out on Feb every year, and this continues up to about 3 weeks. and then it closes. However, for any stations that have volumes have been submitted, then the airlines are able to submit for those stations. And then this was a view to have negotiations and award done by June, so that signing can be done. So one of the benefits of incorporating this component on the AFRA fuel program is that we're able to adopt a volume strategy. Again, as was stated, the cost of SAF is quite high. So if we're able to get a more aggregated amount, we're able to then negotiate with the suppliers as part of the larger negotiations on the conventional jet fuel. That is one. On the second aspect, it's not related to CORSIA, but just one of the decarbonization pathways that we also promote is more direct routes. So I'd just like to inform the participants that AFRA, of course, in collaboration with its partners, IATA, ICAO, AFCAC, the NSPs, the WATS, FIR, successfully implemented the free route airspace last year on 30th of October, and we actually saw quite a good amount of savings from that. So just in the WACAF region, for example, if we were to be more specific to the webinar of today, is that we had 6,336 tons of CO2 emissions avoided during the trial period, and the annualized benefits based on an extrapolation post the trial period was about 10,900 tons of CO2 emissions avoided. A further update on this is that we are currently moving to the East and Southern African region, and trials began on June 18th, 2026. As per the collected data sometime earlier this month, that 7th of July, again, just looking at the CO2 emissions avoided, we had 394. So what we would like to also encourage African operators and airlines is that they should take advantage of the free route airspace, not only because of the environmental aspects, but also from the trial flights we've seen there's less flight hours or flight hours that have actually been saved, as well as fuel. So these are also other savings that you're able to get if you participate. So for the East and Southern African region, we're hoping by end of the year, we will be would have successfully also implemented the free route airspace. So without further ado, then I would then like to welcome NVISA to take the floor for them just to give a case study on the airport's collaborative decision making, data collection challenges, automation of data collection processes, and scope 3 calculation. So Dennis and Sharon, you kindly have the floor.
I'll hand this over to Dennis. Just for my side, very quickly, we talk about ACDM. I think we should also include the airport carbon accreditation scheme. I know I do speak about this a lot. I do mention it a lot. It's very important because the data that is necessary for collection for the airports is also important for the airlines. You will collect the data that you collect, the airports will need it as well. So that's very important to be able to work together. You can use the same data for a common interest in reducing your carbon emissions. Okay, I'll hand over to Dennis now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Very briefly on our side, I think before I hand on further to our colleagues over, Michael and Kumars, I think it's one thing that we've seen already and from the presentation, both NVISAs and of course ICAOs, that SAF is an important bit of the puzzle, but it's not the only bit of the puzzle. So I think that environmental management goes well beyond alternative fuels. I think there's an awareness already that in terms of operational improvements, there's a huge margin for improvements, for lack of a better word. And going beyond that, and going back to the point I made on the social aspects, I think we're all keenly aware that noise, local air quality are also high on the agenda of the aviation sector overall, and particularly in Africa. I think many of our stakeholders will acknowledge that this is something that's quite interesting, and this is something that I know Envisa has done quite a bit of work on already. So I'll perhaps hand over to my colleagues Mikael and Kumash to cover some of the operational parts of aspects of managing these impacts. So over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am going to actually now present what I'm very excited to show everyone. It's actually in line with a lot that was talked about recently. Let me know if everyone is seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, very well.
Thank you.
So I'm Kumar. I'm actually with Envisa for about 4 years. I've been involved in many different projects, but mostly research and development. And I'm actually now very excited to show this project that it has led to. Like, this is piecing together many different innovations that we have done at Envisa, and we call the project Oracle. Its role is to basically be a next generation aviation environmental impact. It's for monitoring, reporting, and forecast of emissions and noise at the same time. So as you all know, aviation also, even though it has many delights that has brought humanity, it has some negatives, which are greenhouse gases. You have your CO2 emissions, your non-CO2 emission that can affect the climate. And when they go unchecked, they can actually affect the air quality around the neighborhoods, around the airport. The local air quality can go down. And then we have also the noise that it can affect different communities around the airport. These are all things that needs to be considered. And with these, there comes some challenges that the industry is facing. You saw some parts of it as ICAO was presenting the offsetting requirements that increase year by year. There are regulations that are putting some pressure on the airlines, on the airports, to uphold some better standards for environmental impact. And these actually create some complexities for airlines. For example, they have to be aware of these impacts that they have on the surrounding environment, while trying not to sacrifice too much on their efficiency, for example, for the schedules, trying to keep up with the economics of their business. There's also expectations from communities that come into play, which is where residents demand to lower the noise residents near the airport areas. And this, of course, these three together create some decision complexity. So you have to juggle regulatory pressure that you have, your operational efficiency that you want to keep, and also the community expectations that need to be, upheld. Then, now, this decision complexity provides an opportunity, provides a need actually for some monitoring exercise, something that can monitor these two, emissions and noise, together at an airport, for the industry to have better view on what kind of environmental impact they are making, how can they improve their environmental impact over time. And right now, there are actually two approaches, and both are falling short on some aspects. So you can either use measuring, so you can use measurement equipment for local air quality, you can use measuring equipment for noise, but this is very expensive to set up. It's even more expensive to maintain. And because it's only giving you one number, it's not allowing the user to basically go into detail on the effect of these different actors that are acting and causing this amount of noise and emission, so that they can choose better paths for alleviating the pressure from emission and noise. There's also modeling, which is there to reduce the cost somewhat, to not need the measuring devices to go into modeling. But these modeling practices that are taking place right now have some shortcomings, which is they have to rely on some assumptions on some key elements of the flights that are happening around the airport, which are, for example, weight and thrust, flap settings, different aspects of the flight that are not disclosed through public available data sets. And these make it so that the accuracy of these monitoring practices from modeling is actually much lower than you should expect. And also, this is still requires some specialists to run these noise models, you know. So you're reducing the cost by some margin, but still you have high costs to hire third-party people to actually do the modeling for you, to generate the reports, to interpret the results, and so on. And this actually can take a lot of time. So with that in mind, I actually saw a question from Q&A, and this is actually exactly what we are trying to do here with this innovation at Envisa, which is trying to digitalize and use the capabilities of AI to make it possible so that we don't rely on measurement equipment and we don't rely on different consultancies to come in and have to spend a lot of time on generating reports, interpreting results, and so on. So everything that Envisa has been doing so far has been mashed together, all the innovations that we've been doing for so long now. They have been mashed together into one software. We call it Oracle. And it's an AI-powered dashboard that is going to primarily be used by airports to increase their intelligence over what kind of environmental impact the flights that are happening in and out of the airport are causing the surrounding areas. So it's going to be eventually a platform that is going to be always on. It's going to be running on cloud. It's going to provide high resolution assessments because, again, with modeling, you have access to very detailed data on what kind of environmental impact each of the different actors have. You will have almost real-time data, and accessible is the historical data, the historical trend analysis, and also rapid operational forecasting, which is very important. So this dashboard is going to bring together as its ultimate goal different actors of the aviation industry, which are the airports, the communities, the airlines, the ANSPs. They can come together, and through the results of this dashboard that it provides, it makes it so much easier for different actors to communicate with each other what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and what kind of effects it's going to have. Okay. So I'm going to go through these very quickly, but one of the innovations that we have made, and we have published actually a paper on this with my colleague Michele, that is actually in the audience, in the panelists, and in 2023, I guess. And it was to bring about an AI-based aircraft performance estimation. This basically makes it so that we don't have to rely on inaccurate assumptions, and we can actually get to these with some neural network training based on simulation data. Then we have the environmental attributions that this tool can give you. It can give you a very detailed analysis over different actors. For example, what kind of what flight cluster you can see contributes the most to a noise over some area near the airport, which has been causing problems maybe. So you can target your actors that you want to target to reduce the emissions and noise much easier with this tool. And then it allows your collaboration, because now that you know what you need to focus on, you can actually pass on the report. Maybe you want to pass on the report to communities to show you the progress you've made. Maybe you want to pass on the report to the airlines or to the ANSPs to show this flight cursor or this SID needs to be adjusted so that the noise over this area can be reduced. This is all possible with Oracle. And of course, as I said, with third-party, you need a specialist to come up with report generations, we come up with reports for you, which can take a lot of time. But we have taken all of that out of the equation because everything in Oracle is now automated. Even the report generation, you can customize your reports that you want to make to communities, regulators, airport management, sustainability teams, or different stakeholders. So everything can be done automatically at a much lower cost than is right now out there through consultancies. And you can save time and money both at the same time with no cost over accuracy. And also we have now very fast scenario forecasting because we are doing an innovation on how to keep noise data, noise and emission data so that we can be able to forecast future scenarios. Maybe you want to change a procedure, maybe you want to change a fleet, maybe you want to increase the performance of a A320 fleet that you have by substituting an engine to a better performance one. You can do all of these automatically again inside of the tool. You can maybe advise scenarios that has traffic growth. Maybe you want to see what happens if my traffic grows by 20% by the year 2030. How much is it going to affect local communities? This is all possible very fast inside of our tool. So this is available right now in local version. And what we are envisioning right now is a future model that is running on cloud. It's always online. And one of these future visions is that we don't want the client to actually do anything. We wanted to interact with an agentic AI and then ask it, for example, which flight cluster contributes the most for noise over this eastern part of the community. And the AI will basically use the data and then present you the report. For example, generate a community noise report for Q2 2026. This is all possible. This is actually done by our partner, Wingbits. I'm going to present shortly. But this is all possible, and it's envisioned for the cloud platform that is going to host the Oracle software. So what kind of benefits does it have for airlines? I mean, as I said, this tool is primarily targeted for airports because they are the one hosting the flights. They are the ones that are responsible basically for the scope 3 emissions, the noise that is going to affect the neighborhoods. But this can have benefits for airlines as well because we have some optimization algorithms, for example, inside of the tool, which enables the airports to show benefits for adjustments to the routes that are currently being flown at the airport. And for an airline itself, if we want to talk about direct benefits, it can have benefits in terms of showing them operational insight. So if we have availability for data from the airlines, we can show them some insights on what kind of operations are causing you the most harm in terms of fuel flow, for example, or noise over some areas, or emissions, Then we have the regulatory transparency, because with Oracle, as I said, you can have reports that are customized for different ends. For example, your regulatory bodies, you can have cyclic reports that are generated automatically with the tool targeted for some regulation. Then you can show, of course, your sustainability progress, because these reports, as I said, the dashboard shows the historical trend of emission and noise for different actors, for airlines, for different aircraft types, for everything. So all of this is available through one dashboard, one tool, everything mashed together. So as I said, I think this is the goal of this webinar for me. I think this is the message that we want to send, is that the bringing down emission and noise is not possible by focusing on one actor. Everything and everyone has to come together. And the end goal of designing Oracle to me was that we can now bring everyone together. This is a tool that can provide insight for every actor, and it can make it much easier for them to communicate with each other on ways that they can improve their environmental footprint over the surrounding areas. Now, as I said, even though right now we do have almost completed the local version of the tool that I presented right now, we are planning to make it much more accessible, much more diverse and scalable through a funding program that we are actually applying for. It's called Eurostars project. And through this project, we are seeking to make the platform into the cloud so that everyone from around the world can have access to it. And it makes it actually much easier to achieve that communication path that I said between all the actors inside the industry. So we want to expand our AI capabilities, make the tool much more scalable, integrate some enhanced data that is coming from our partner Wingbits, and scale around the globe. So our partnership with Wingbits is actually surrounding the need for some infrastructure that allows us to get the data automatically from an API online, so that nothing is needed from the side of the client. They are just logging into the tool and then they are seeing everything online already. So what we are doing with Wingbits is to make the data scalable, make it so that they have some premium data set that they can also include in their platform online. And this premium data set is going to feed Oracle in the cloud so that all the data, historical data, the forecasting, everything is available without any diminishing the accuracy of the results. And here I want to actually present an opportunity that is there for an airline collaboration. We are actually looking for this Eurostars funding program to partner up with an airline so that we can make possible the validation studies that we want to perform. We want to validate the outputs of our tool against some real data that comes from the airlines. What benefit this has for the airline is an early access to a cutting edge platform that is going to make it much easier for different actors in the aviation industry to see and communicate their environmental impact in an automated, easy, and cost-effective way. So this environmental optimization that also I mentioned before is going to be available throughout the tool and to the airline that is going to be participating into this funding program with us. And every other innovation that we are planning for this funding program that is going to take about 2 years to complete. And as a last slide, I wanted to mention again, the vision that we have with this tool is to build a better future for the sustainability industry, to make it much more cost effective for everyone to participate, to everyone to see their environmental impact, to be able to see how they can bring down their emissions, their noise, and communicate effectively with different actors and make it transparent for communities also. So if you want to participate, or if you want us to give a demo, actually I didn't include the demo here because it's actually kind of sensitive topic right now because we are going into this funding program. If you want to see a demo, you can contact me at my email at Envisa, and then we can set up a meeting and we can set up a demo for you so you can see actually in action the things that I presented here. Thank you very much. I will be available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Kumas and Dennis. So I'd just like to open the floor. If there are any questions, you can then post them now. I can see we have about 6 minutes left on the program. And I jotted down one thing from your slide, which I think is a key point, that no single actor can do this alone. So collaboration has to be part of this decarbonization journey for the industry. So if there's no question on the chat box, just like to thank Kumas and Dennis again. So we'll move to the closing, and I'd like to then introduce maybe our co-organizers. So we can start maybe with Franklin, if you're still on the call, and Chinga. You can give some closing remarks, if any. And then we can have Sharon, and then we can close with the SG Afra. So I can see Chinga. Franklin, would you like to start, or Chinga?
Chinga can go first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chinga, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'd like to just extend our appreciation to Afra and the rest of the collaborators for this joint activity, and also the participants to enable us to share the work that we're doing in ICAO. And as I mentioned, we remain available for any support. Please feel free to reach out to us at the regional office level, and also to visit our website. We have quite an extensive bit of information that is available there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chinga. Franklin?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. I also just want to join Chinga in, first of all, thanking you, Dan, and the entire team at Afra, and to Sharon and the team from Envisa. Thank you so much for this collaboration and putting these things together. On my side, my remarks really just mirrors what Michael Chinga has said. AFCAC is here to support and work with you. We predominantly work with states, but we also do have MOUs and collaboration frameworks, especially with AFRA. I encourage all the representatives from the airline to really take advantage of the presence of Chinga, the presence of Envisa and Dan, and even AFCAC, to continuously improve and build their capacity, and to also contribute to the strengthening of civil aviation systems and industry in Africa. Thank you, and looking forward to meeting you again in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franklin. Sharon, would you be doing the closing on behalf of Envisa?
Okay, well, thank you. It's always a privilege to work with you and to work with all the stakeholders on the continent. There's so much growth, there's so much opportunity, there's so much initiative and opportunity there to develop and to become really a star player in the aviation ecosystem. So we're here to help and to support you. As always, working hand in hand with you is very important, and to turn the frameworks and to turn all the policy, etc., to turn that into practical reality, so that sustainable aviation is just the given in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So last but not least, my SG, I can see you there.
Thank you, Daniel. I want to thank all the speakers, Sharon, Chinga, Franklin, yourself, and all the team from Envisa for this very interesting workshop. What I want to say is that the decarbonization is a long journey. We should keep our engagement, being together during this journey. And I hope that it has been very fruitful for Afra Member Airlines. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you so much, SG, and thank you all for joining in. The presentation slides will be shared as well as all links after this webinar. And we look forward to hosting you again on the 15th of September for the second part of this webinar series. Till then, stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.